Following information is presented for discussion and educational purposes only and is not intended or provided as treatment information for any specific person or behavior. If you or a loved one is having behavioral difficulties, you are encouraged to seek professional consultation as soon as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Scottsdale, Arizona. We are here at Scottsdale Pediatric Behavioral Services, and this is episode 10 of Ask the Behavior Doctors. Today we're going to talk about managing behavior in the car. Had a lot of patients recently with some unique car-related behaviors. A lot of times parents are driving in the car, riding in the car with their spouse, and children begin to engage in all kinds of crazy behaviors. Lots of tantruming in the car, lots of arguing with brother and sister in the car. I even recently had a kid that kicked out some windows in the car. So behavior can range and be pretty extreme in the car. The reason I felt a need to address car-related behavior is that it's really difficult to manage behavior when you're driving in the car. It's even difficult to manage behavior if you're the person sitting in the passenger seat in the car. So one thing I really wanted to talk about was some ideas to kind of prevent, manage, and change that behavior in the car. So the question basically goes like this: Dr. Jake, what can I do when I'm driving? What can I do when I'm riding in the passenger seat if my children start to tantrum, start to hit each other, start to destroy the car, start to unbuckle their seatbelt, try to get out of their seat? I've even had children, what do I do if my kid tries to jump out of the car? So obviously the name of the game here is prevention. When you're at a position where you can't really do much as a parent, you can't really directly manage that behavior in the car, you want to try and prevent any issues as much as possible. Managing is much less effective. I always tell my patients, prevention is easier than crisis management. So we always want to invest as much effort as possible into preventing the behavioral issues. So I want you to really think about what are the triggers for these behaviors most of the time. Is it siblings who sit too close to each other? Is it loud noises in the car? Is it arguing in the car? Is it coming from a specific location or going to a specific location that makes that car ride unenjoyable? And when we figure out those triggers, we can address those triggers and try and manage those triggers effectively so that we make that naughty behavior unnecessary, we make it unneeded, we make it useless to really engage in. So I want you to think about those triggers and then think about how we can prevent those triggers from being an issue as much as possible in that car. So another thing I want to think about too is here the 5 senses. So one of the best prevention strategies possible is distracting your child, getting them focused on something else besides each other, besides the unpleasant things in that car. We want car rides to be as pleasurable, as relaxing, as stress and demand free as possible, because if they are that, then there won't be as much of a need to engage in that naughty behavior in the car. So parents, your job is to think in the terms of the senses. How can we make that behavior unnecessary? How can we stimulate our child? So there's this concept called learning channels. Learning channels are basically the forms of input and output that children seek when they're learning. All learning occurs through channels. So basically that's kind of another concept of the senses. So this is what I mean. A lot of children seek that kinesthetic input. They'll seek toys or seek things that kind of have that kinesthetic physical property to them. So remember, children seek input. And of course, behaviorally, they output in certain channels. So a lot of children can be loud vocally. They can do a lot of visual types of things. They can do a lot of kinesthetic types of things. Auditory, make a lot of noises. Really, it just kind of depends on you analyzing your child, you observing. So my point is, watch your child for a little bit, really get some information and see what is my child seeking input-wise and what are they doing output-wise. And that's probably going to be the best sensory place to start. So for example, if your child loves auditory stimulation, loves listening to the radio, you can either use that radio as the main stimulus in the car, or you could consider using headphones, consider using an iPod, consider using a private audio device, especially if there's multiple people in the car that probably won't agree on music. It may be best to use some kind of headphones thing. The nice thing about headphones or some kind of device is, again, it makes that experience pleasurable. It gives you something child to attend to. If that's the most stimulating thing in the car, the more appropriate thing that they're attending to, then the other stuff, the naughty behaviors, won't be as stimulating and it won't be as likely to distract your child or to get their attention. So remember, parents, it's all about what do you want your child to attend to in the car, and that's what you need to give them access to during that car ride. Now, a lot of parents will come to me and will say, well, but Jake, what if my kid was just a total brat before they got in the car? There's no way I'm going to give them access to the things they want in the car. Okay, well, what I recommend in that instance is that there's special stimuli that your child almost always has access to in the car. Remember, you're trying to prevent naughty behavior. And if you have appropriate forms of stimulation that are likely to entertain your child or are likely to keep and get their attention, we're trying to prevent naughty behavior. So parents, what I want you to do is possibly consider having items that are car specific and allow free access to those items in the spirit of preventing problem behavior while riding in the car. So that's the way I want you to look at that, and I want you to think about that. I mean, for example, let's say your child has a special iPad at home. Well, maybe they don't need to access the iPad in the car, but maybe they can have another type of tablet device that may be smaller, less quality than an iPad, but still allows for their favorite form of stimulation. Well, then what you're going to do, like I said, is probably keep your child distracted or entertained and focused on that item instead of focused on brother or sister or making loud noises and disrupting you while you're driving. So again, prevention is the key, and thinking in terms of senses. How can you stimulate your child's senses in the car so that you give them the most entertaining, the most engaging items that prevent the need for any other type of behavior, okay? I want you to keep those car rides as relaxing and stress-free as possible. I don't want you to talk about naughty behavior in the car. I want you to minimize discussion of that. I don't want you to have big stressful discussions about awful school performance, about poor choices, about chores your child's gonna have to do when they get home. The reason I don't want you to do that is because you're risking triggering a blow-up. You're risking triggering a major tantrum, a major episode of behavior. It's not worth it. And remember, when you're at your weakest point, when you're driving or in that passenger seat, you can't really manage a blow-up nearly as well as when you're at home. So parents, I want you to keep those really stressful discussions, and I want you to keep any focus or attention on negative behaviors. I want you to keep that out of the car ride as much as possible. The same goes for partners, for parents. Model good energy. Don't fight. Don't get into heated discussions in the car. You model that type of energy, you bring that dynamic into the car. Well, then, like I said, you risk triggering a major blow-up from the child who can feed off that energy. Even small children can sense when parents are upset with each other. Even small children can sense that tension, that rise in emotion, and children are definitely going to be more likely to be on edge, more likely to be anxious, scared, worried, to not feel safe, and they're probably going to be more likely to explode or to tantrum behaviorally if they sense that things aren't safe, aren't comfortable, aren't low stress in the car. So keep those arguments, keep those disagreements, keep any tense discussions out of the car until your child has shown consistently that they can ride appropriately in the car and have those types of discussions or exposure. Again, if your child is engaging in major tantrum behaviors, major blow-ups, major aggression types of behaviors, reduce those triggers as much as possible. So I want you to ignore annoying or minor behavior in the car. Remember, parents, you only prompt something you can consequence. So what I mean is, if Johnny's making a loud noise, you can say, Johnny, be quiet. But if you can't enforce immediate consequence or make a child stop that behavior immediately, it's useless prompting it. So I want you to ignore minor or annoying behaviors as much as possible. You can change the level or the type of stimulation in the car. Let's say, for example, your child's engaging in some behaviors you find annoying. Let's say there's some whining, there's some requesting. Let's say they're bickering with brother or sister a little bit. Low-level stuff, but still annoying. You could turn the radio up. You could roll the windows down. You can totally change the discussion, change the environment quickly, change it immediately, change it in some obvious, noticeable way. By doing that, by changing that environment significantly, you're more likely to redirect that energy or redirect the focus of the children to something a little bit more productive and appropriate. Tend to the best behavior in the car. I often like to do this, especially with siblings. So if I have a patient I'm working with, and let's say they're being super naughty, but let's say brother or sister is engaging in behaviors that are more appropriate, it is totally acceptable to withdraw that attention for the naughty behavior and to put it on the behavior that you really like. So let's say Johnny's being really loud, really disruptive, but Susie, she's sitting there so nice and quiet. She's keeping her hands to herself. Talk to Susie. Make it obvious the behavior you love. Make it obvious that you would love to talk to Johnny as soon as he's willing to engage in behaviors that look like Susie's. Tend to the best behavior and the best behavior in the car possible. Model good energy. Again, this goes to this not fighting thing, but be light, be fun, have interesting conversation. Don't talk about anything that has to do with demands, anything that has to do with punitive consequences, anything that has to do with something that person finds unpleasurable. Model good energy. Bring good energy into that car environment as much as possible. If you bring that good energy, that child is more likely to reflect and mirror that type of energy back to you. Make good car behavior obvious. Tell your child what you expect. Sometimes they don't understand what you want them to do. They don't understand the behaviors that will get your attention, and they don't understand why it's even important to engage in good car-related behaviors. So make that behavior really obvious. For example, hey buddy, you're sitting so nice, you're being so quiet. I'm really proud of you. Oh my gosh, you're being such a good boy. Or let's say your child's engaging in conversation that is really appropriate. Man, you're such a good talker. You're so easy to talk to, buddy. I'm really proud of you. I love you very much. Praising that type of behavior that you want. Young children especially have no idea what appropriate or inappropriate car behavior looks like. So parents, you need to teach them, you need to train them, and you need to practice, and you need to make it obvious the behaviors that you really like. Make good car behavior valuable. So most kids, and again, I'll even ask little 2 or 3-year-olds sometimes, did you know you were supposed to be good in the car? Is there any benefit to being good in the car? Does mommy give you a special prize if you make really good choices in the car? Most children have very little incentive or very little obvious methods for behaving well in the car. They don't even know it's important. So parents, again, if it's something you really want to stress, make it obvious to the child that that's really important, and make it a really critical way to earn access to the best things they want. So let's say they have some reinforcers they just absolutely love, some things they want to access a lot. You could make good car behavior one of the top 3 or 5 ways of getting access, earning points. You could use a token system in the car, even if you wanted to. My point is, your children are more likely to give you consistently good car-related behaviors when you make that important, and when you make that an important part of accessing all of the things they want and desire. Just some ideas here, parents, for some specific behaviors. Some tough things that parents kind of ask me about. Number one is children unbuckling their car seat. I get this a lot. Let's say they unbuckle their car seat, they unbuckle their seatbelt latch, especially when the kids get really good manual, fine motor dexterity with their hands. They start unbuckling a lot of stuff. I've had children as young as 3 or 4 who can figure out those buckles really quickly. This behavior can be really dangerous and can be really hard to manage in the moment. Again, if you're driving or you're a passenger and your kid's 2 or 3 rows behind you, it's impossible to quickly get to them if they unbuckle. Parents, I don't want to underestimate how serious this behavior is. I've seen some really bad things happen when children unbuckle. Children can get hurt pretty quickly. Children can go at other people in the car. Children can distract the driver and possibly cause an accident with other people outside of the car. Unbuckling is a serious thing. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen parents do is that they'll try and ignore unbuckling behavior, and they'll really shape up some poor responses, some poor learning history there. Parents, I think unbuckling is such a serious thing that you should definitely stop the car as soon as you reasonably can get to a safe place. The reason I think this is that, again, I've seen too many things go wrong. You have no control. When a child is in a moving vehicle that's shifting, that's unstable, and they could possibly hurt their siblings, they could possibly distract or throw things at the driver, there's too much risk if your child's not in their seat. It's against the law and it's dangerous. So my advice to parents is that if your child unbuckles, immediately get to a safe place, stop, calm your child, do whatever you got to do, put prevention strategies in place, keep them stimulated, keep them engaged with something productive, and get them back buckled. Parents, there are all kinds of barrier devices, all kinds of prevention devices that prevent your child from unbuckling their car seat. And they even have safety buttons or safety mechanisms in them that make it safe just in case you get into an accident to quickly get the device unbuckled. Go on to Google, type in preventing child from unbuckling or things for special needs children that keep them in their seat. You'll get tons of devices. There's a great website called especialneeds.com. I've had many of my parents with many of my patients go on there. They sell full body harnesses, they sell special buckles, they sell special barrier devices for seatbelts. I mean, there are tons of options and items available to keep children safely buckled in their seat. If you can keep a child in their seat and you can keep them generally in that area, you're probably most likely to keep that child and other people as safe as possible. So parents, again, what I recommend, if your child is consistently unbuckling, number one, get a prevention device, get a barrier device, order that as quickly as possible, have that always on hand. Start with using it. Once your child reduces trying to engage in that unbuckling activity, then you can intermittently try going without it. You can fade the need for that barrier device, but you always need to have that on hand after the first time your child tries to unbuckle. Again, if you don't have that device, my advice is to immediately get to a safe place, stop, calm the child, put prevention, stimulating strategies in place, get them back home, and then as soon as you get home, order a device, some kind of barrier device that keeps that buckle in place. Again, a really serious behavior that has a lot of risks to it. I would highly recommend not letting this one go much longer than 1 or 2 times tops. Again, if your child's consistently doing it beyond that, definitely seek professional help because it's such a serious behavior. Aggression with siblings. A lot of times children can become aggressive towards their siblings or towards parents who are driving. I've had children throw heavy items. Children engage in really serious kicking behavior that literally prevented the parent from operating the vehicle appropriately. There's a lot of barriers you can buy, literal physical barriers you can buy for a car. These can be barriers that you just put in place or barriers you can actually mount. These can be soft mesh barriers, hard plastic barriers. You can put barriers between siblings. You can put them between seating positions. You can also put them right at their feet to prevent their feet from going up in a kicking motion. You can place those things between seats. Again, go on to Google and just type in barriers for children in the car, barriers to prevent kicking. You'll find tons, and again, that especialneeds.com, you'll find tons of devices that are meant to be mounted or placed in the car that will keep children's hands, arms, and feet in a safe space. Remember, we can start with that barrier and then fade it eventually over time. Obviously, it's no fun to have to need a barrier long term, but again, we just need to teach your child and remove those triggers. And if your child can't be touched or bothered by other people, they're most likely not going to need to engage in those naughty behaviors very long. I want you to start small with short rides to pleasurable places. Remember, good car behavior is just like any other behavior. If your child doesn't have practice, they don't know it's important, and if that behavior is not valuable, you're not going to get that behavior consistently, especially with small children. They need to know that it's important. So start small with short rides to pleasurable places before going on long car rides with multiple stops that your child doesn't find any value in. If they haven't shown you that they're able to do the short, small car rides, car rides to pleasurable places, then they're probably not ready yet for the longer trips. Be smart, be strategic, parents. Shape that behavior up systematically, shape it up in small doses, shape it up over time. But definitely make that behavior important. When possible, try and start and end the car ride with pleasurable stops. The reason to do that is, again, if your child knows they're going to start and end with something they enjoy doing, well, you motivate them, you make it valuable, you place an incentive to do the behavior that you want. So that's exactly what you love to do. But if you only have one choice, try and end the car ride. So if you can't start and end the car ride with something pleasurable, try and end the car ride with something pleasurable. It goes back to that Premack principle. By doing a bunch of low preferred activities and pairing them with a high preferred activity, you make the low preferred activities less aversive. So parents, if you have those unpleasurable stops at first, but have that incentive of the pleasurable one at the end, you make it more likely your child will be motivated or have some reason to engage in pleasurable, appropriate behavior. Other types of ideas, parents, besides just prevention strategies, again, another good prevention strategy is you can have someone try and ride back with the children. Again, all of that's temporary. All of it should really be prevention focused as much as possible as you train and teach your child those appropriate behaviors, as you reinforce and shape those consistently good behaviors, okay? So parents, I want to thank you again for asking us these questions. I want to thank you for sending us these questions at info@scottsdalepbs.com. We want to thank our photographer, Mr. Philip Carnevale of philipcarnevalephotography.com. And we want to encourage you to continue submitting those questions to us on our website. And we want to thank you for joining us here at Scottsdale Pediatric Behavioral Services and Ask the Behavior Doctors.